Welcome to the Waves Business Coaching Podcast, where we help business owners and leaders build their dream business. This week on the podcast, I talked to Brad Pearse. He owns a sales coaching business, and he previously worked at another company. It was Salesperson of the Year out of the whole country. His parents, he has a really cool story about his parents and how they built a business from $0 to $700 million in consumer electronics in the 90s. And he talks about customer experience and what he learned from his parents' business about how to make the best customer experience possible and how it relates to sales. And I think that connection is really, really great. It was a connection that we made while on the podcast, and some light bulbs went off for me even. So loved this conversation with Brad. So be sure to tune in for the whole one. And at the end, we make that connection between customer experience and sales and how they are related and how it can make your business better. For the month of November, I am doing a giveaway of my book with Goodreads. So we've partnered with Goodreads to give away 100 free copies of Master Your First Job. So if you go to Goodreads and you search my book, Master Your First Job, or just click on it in the episode description, we're giving away 100 copies of the book on Goodreads. But let's dive into my conversation with Brad Pearse. Brad, thanks so much for being on the Waves Business Coaching Podcast. I'd love for you to share a little bit about you, who you are, and your story.
Yeah, Jacob, thanks for having me on. I super excited to be here. And my story, essentially, I ended up growing up in an entrepreneurial, family business. And what was really cool about that is that a lot of different businesses that I kind of just was in and around, but primarily in the consumer electronics retail world. And then my mom actually operated some food operations, which all stemmed from my grandparents out of Minneapolis. So a lot of like retail, restaurant, entrepreneurial kind of, experience kind of growing up. So that was kind of where I landed my first jobs working.
So you say like consumer electronics, it's like Best Buy kind of companies, but I know, big chain ones weren't it back in the day. Like what kind of stores are we talking about?
Yeah. Great question. So my dad, he ended up actually opening up a franchise business called Team Electronics. And it was a small mom and pop electronics store, similar to like a Radio Shack. It was owned by a company called Dayton Hudson. And Dayton Hudson is actually now the Target Corporation out of Minneapolis.
There you go.
So it was their electronics arm. And so he started off with one store as a franchise because he always wanted to run his own business. And then 5 years into it, those franchise fees started to kind of creep up, and they broke off and did their own thing. So
I was going to ask, when he said Minneapolis, I was like, the one company I know of out of Minneapolis is Target. So I know that runs the economy up in that area of the country.
Yeah.
So you got to be a part of a family growing up, entrepreneurial family. Obviously you own your business now. How did growing up in an entrepreneurial family kind of shape who you are as a business owner?
Yeah. I mean, as a family, in a family, like business has always been like a cornerstone conversation piece at dinner, like every single night. And, you would hear stories a lot when my dad got home from work about what happened that day, advertising strategy, issues in the store that they had to fix or whatever that might be. And so just kind of this lingo of business and business strategy was just something that, we just grew up with. So
is that something you enjoyed? I'm imagining I'm a very curious person. So anything interesting when I was a kid, I loved listening to that kind of conversation at the dinner table. I'm imagining like a 13-year-old Brad, and dad comes home talking about like advertising cost and ROI on like consumer electronic. Like what was it interesting? Like, is this something that you're like, ooh, that's what I want to do? Or were the topics interesting?
When I was younger, it wasn't interesting. I didn't really know, honestly, like I really didn't, like I knew he ran a retail store, but I wasn't like intrigued by it in a lot of ways. However, as I got older, the company started to grow, and as more locations started to open up, they started advertising like on TV. So you'd start to see like the brand on TV. So then I was like, oh, they're on TV. And so I started kind of getting curious a little bit more about what he did. And then from there, honestly, it started to kind of like really grab hold of me. And, honestly, that's where I got my passion for business and entrepreneurship. So
This is a question I did not tee you up for. So,
yeah.
a question I've asked previous guests. I wrote a book recently called Master Your First Job. Was your first job at mom and dad's consumer electronics store?
My first job was actually at my mom's food operation in Minneapolis. So she
Okay,
ran a couple different food operations that my grandparents owned, and then my mom and uncle and my aunt took them over. So she ran three restaurants with my aunt and uncle. One of them was called the Pancake House. So
okay,
my very first job when I was 10 years old, they put me to work as a busboy at the Pancake House.
nice. We
Yeah.
both had first jobs in food. I love that.
Yes. Yes.
So I'm curious. I want to keep on a consumer electronics for a second. Is that still an industry that you are intrigued by? I ask because I cannot get out of the food industry. I mean, I worked for 10 years for Chick-fil-A, and any quick service news I'm all about. And my wife probably hates it. Just this week, I was talking about some of the changes that Starbucks is making with their new CEO. Because I'm being in the quick service industry, I'm fascinated by these big companies and what they're doing, and like what they're doing to stay ahead. And
Totally.
food is such a low margin
Yeah.
business. Is consumer electronics still something that you follow and like keep up with?
It is. It is. As a matter of fact, the business that I run now as a sales coach and consulting company, I'm focused on the consumer electronics world, or the custom integrator world, if you will. But to answer your question around the food industry, like
Yeah,
I'm definitely still intrigued around the food industry. What's interesting is, like, growing up in retail and restaurants, I'll go into a restaurant and I'll like pinpoint the different like spots of like how the employee greets the guest in the store.
that's right.
I'll like look in the back and see the cook, and the grease traps and all that kind of stuff. So
That's right.
yeah, I definitely kind of look out for that. But also at the same time, the electronics world, that is definitely something anytime I step into a retail store, it's just like I feel like I'm at home in a lot of ways.
Right. So you got to watch and kind of be a part of a family who, your dad built this business from, we've talked about, from zero to $700 million. Is that nine figures? That's nine figures. Yeah.
It
From
is.
like million to seven, eight, nine figures. Um, what do you feel like was a defining moment in that journey for him?
Honestly, for him, I think so. They started off, they built one store, and the business grew to 9 locations. And 9 locations, they were generating about 62 to $65 million in revenue at that point. And really, what the turning point was at that moment was when in the Colorado market, this is kind of like the early 90s, a company called Circuit City and another retailer called Best Buy were entering into the market. And so that was like the moment of truth where my dad could say, hey, we need to run the other direction or take these guys head on. And he decided to take these guys head on. And at the time, the store formats were about a 12 to 15,000 square foot format
Okay.
as far as store size, square feet size. And so they literally re-engineered their entire business model to be a big box retailer. So they reevaluated the product categories, the guest experience, and built 35,000 square foot, 40,000 square foot stores to go. Now, in that moment, they did actually go public as well.
So it's interesting with when I think about Circuit City and Best Buy coming on, my first reaction would be, let's be different. So he kind of went and said, how can we be similar and beat them at their own game?
Well, he very, 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 very good point. So he still thought, how can we be different,
Right, right.
but have the depth and breadth of product to sell at maybe the same rate. So what they found was this kind of fine line walking of a specialty retailer
Yeah.
and a big box discounter.
Okay.
And so they walked that fine line, and they kind of positioned themselves as like the mid to upper tier, retail model. They eventually wanted to be kind of known as like the Nordstroms of the consumer electronics industry. So everybody had their, jacket and ties, customer service, the whole thing.
So talk to me more about that. How did that set them apart? You said that the Nordstrom of the consumer electronics industry. having the
Yeah.
tie. So you're going up against businesses that I'm assuming, I don't know at that time if they had deeper pockets or not. Obviously, Circuit City and Best Buy are two companies I've grown up with. Best Buy's still around, but how do you then set yourself apart and be the Nordstrom of the consumer electronics industry?
100%, 100%. So the big thing about their model really came down to the customer experience. And
Okay.
like we had a mission statement. I used to work there too, selling on the floor and all
Yeah.
that. But our mission statement was to provide the world's best experience in consumer electronics.
Okay.
So everything that we did was all built around the customer and guest, what we call the guest experience. And so, we really took pride in that. And one of the key kind of components in that to really separate the business from everybody else was customer service and product knowledge. Now, when you think about customer service or customer experience, there's a lot that goes into it. As you know, working in the food industry, there's a lot that goes into it from the moment that individual walks in the store. Well,
Yeah.
they mapped out a lot of the different friction points of what could happen as soon as a guest walks into the store, and how do you take those friction points away for that guest. So they created this model called the 10 Commandments of Customer Service. And that 10 Commandments of Customer Service was essentially the customer journey that we took those guests by, or down, I guess, to the point of purchase, and then even post purchase follow-ups that happened after that.
So y'all looked at a whole of what happens when a customer's in the or I say a restaurant, goodness, in the in the store.
Yeah.
Um, so used to the restaurant industry. Is in the store, and they're like, okay, at each point, how do we increase the customer experience? And that became these 10
Yeah.
commandments of the customer experience.
Yeah.
What were a few of your favorite ones?
Honestly, the very first one, and the customer. So greet the customer within 30 seconds. So the rule is no matter where you're at in the floor, as soon as that guest comes into the store, you make eye contact with that guest and greet them
Yeah.
within 30 seconds. And then at that point in time, we were offering bottled water or coffee.
Okay.
So we were extending an offer of, hey, do you want a bottle of water or do you want coffee? Welcome to Ultimate Electronics. So
Yeah.
it was kind of that first step, and the water, the bottled water and coffee, I don't know, for some reason sticks out in my mind the most, because if you think about when you invite people over to your house, we just had my sister and my brother-in-law at our house down here. And one of the first things that, we did was we opened up the door. They walked in, they had their bags. Well, we grabbed their bags right away out of their hands, walked them into their room. The next thing that we did is offer them a drink,
Yep.
wanted water or whatever. And it's almost the same kind of like tone in that retail store that we try to deliver for guests, that they're truly guests and are.
And practically, they're going to stick around longer because they have something to drink.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which,
Yeah.
hey, it's brilliant. You know what I mean? Like, I'm
Yeah.
like, oh, I'm not gonna have to run out because I'm like, man, I'm thirsty. I forgot my water in the car.
Yeah.
Or, ooh, it's cold and raining. Let me come inside. Now you've offered me coffee.
Well, you think about the guest experience at a Chick-fil-A. A good friend of mine, her dad is actually a Chick-fil-A owner operator.
Cool.
And one of the things that he always did really well, and still does to this day, he has somebody stand there as soon as a guest walks into the restaurant.
Yeah.
And has like samples ready to go.
Brilliant.
Now it's not like coffee or water, but he has samples ready to go.
Yeah.
And it's just an inviting feeling.
I'll give you a fun fact. That was one of Truett's marketing principles, is basically just give away food. He's like, if people try my chicken sandwich, they're going to want to buy one. Like if I just give them one, they'll want to buy more. Hey, that's risk reversal. That's believing in your product. You know what I mean? Like I believe in it so much, I'm going to give it to you for free.
Oh,
and
yeah.
You're going to like it so much, you're going to want to buy more.
Yes. Yes.
Which is fun. So, okay, I want to go back to something else you said. Write this down. Your mission statement. Can you say it one more time? I don't want to misquote it.
It was to provide the world's best customer experience in consumer electronics.
The world's best customer experience in consumer electronics. How do you measure that? Because I worked for Chick-fil-A, and the the vision statement, I guess. Chick-fil-A is a great mission-driven organization. A lot of statements. Was to be the world's most caring company. And
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, but I like the fact that there are a lot of metrics to actually back that up if they're being successful. So how did you measure success in that area, like with that family business?
Well, the big part of it is just customer surveys. I
Yeah.
mean, back then it was really just kind of initial like feedback from customers, sending surveys out and really listening to the customer, really understanding, what their needs are essentially. And that was really kind of our scorecard in
Yeah.
a lot of ways.
So customer surveys, and you're getting obviously a lot of data from that and
Yeah.
asking specific questions that are important to help measure that. I think
Yeah.
it's really important. I think getting feedback from your customers is a very practical way to help you measure success. Whatever the target is at that point,
Yeah.
getting data to back that up, make sure you're actually accomplishing that being important.
Yeah.
Something you and I have talked about is mentorship, and I know that mentorship has influenced your approach to business. It influenced your parents' business. Why is it especially valuable when you think about your business now in sales? How is mentorship or why is mentorship so important in that industry?
Yeah, for me, I mean, mentorship is like, man, if you can find a good mentor when you're starting your career off, it can make or break your career.
Yeah.
And at least the beginning of it, right? I'll tell you a story. I was my very first job out of college. I was knocking door to door, selling long distance services for Sprint, and I couldn't hit quota. Like I'm flaring all over the place. I'm knocking on doors, getting doors slammed in my face, people telling me no. And it was frustrating. And, I had a pretty good boss at that point in time, but I didn't really have somebody that really took me under my wing. Right. So I really did feel like, man, I got to figure this out. Well, ultimately what happened is I couldn't hit quota and I ended up getting let go. I got fired. And that was a pretty pivotal moment, first job out of college, and you want to do sales and it doesn't work out. Well, thankfully a couple years later I get a call from a manufacturer rep firm in the consumer electronics industry, for me to jump on board as a rep for them. And
Okay.
they knew me from working at the family business because I was working in the store, but this individual took me under his wing, who was the owner, and
Okay.
he taught me everything I know now, fundamentally around sales, around the electronics business, around strategy, all of that. And as a result, I really kind of took heart to that. And a couple years later, I became like the number one sales rep in the country. Became salesperson of the year, came sales trainer of the year, and then went on from there to 3 different companies and was like the number one ranked sales rep. So mentorship can really, really make a big impact for sure.
So you would attribute a lot of that success to someone just simply taking the time to mentor, to take you under their wing and make you
100%.
successful.
Yep.
What did they do that made that work? Like you say, take you under their wing. I think that can be ambiguous. Like if I'm a business leader listening to this episode right now, what are some practical steps they can take to actually mentor people well?
Yeah. Yeah. It's all about building relationships, right? So when you think about kind of leading teams and building, your team out, or, making new hires, so on and so forth, it's really about intentionality in relationships. So the
Mm,
intentionality is really about, hey, I brought somebody new on my team. I need to be intentional in truly building a relationship with this person. They're there, yes, to do a job, but they're there on the same team that I am on. And as a leader, I really believe that it's our role and duty to be more of a servant heart position,
yeah,
right? And
same.
serve
Yep.
others in that way. So that's one. Two, the intentionality part is actually taking the time to take them to lunch and get to know them and start having these conversations. And you kind of get in this rhythm of actually maybe having a lunch, maybe once a month with this individual, and talking about, not just how their day is going, but how their life is going, what's going on in their life. Other things like, hey, how are you feeling so far in your role since you just started maybe 30 days ago or whatever it might be, right? And you start to kind of build this relationship and trust to where they start to kind of open up to you, at a level where you can have real genuine conversations. And from there, it just snowballs. And that's what this individual did with me. He took me to lunches. We connected. He took the time to get to know me. He took the time to sit down and just coach me through some of the struggles that I was going through. And it worked out. So
Something I've shared before in this podcast, and if you've heard it, listen to it again. Um, Something an old boss of mine said is take care of people and they'll take care of the business. And it's something I will just like forever have as my mantra as a business leader and an employer. Will be like, if I take care of my team, they will take care of the business. Everything else is going to be okay. You got to take care of your house first. Intentionality in relationship. It's funny. I have a little notebook in front of me. I wrote down those two words kind of vertically. And as you were talking, I was like, oh, so when you're intentional, like you're going to start to build a relationship, which is going to lead to more intentionality. I'm like, it's like a cycle,
yeah,
right? Like,
yeah,
um, intentionality is one of my favorite words when it comes to business and leadership because it's something that is 100% in your control. Because it's all dependent on you. It's something you have to work for. But again, it's in your control, which to me is anything that I can get as a business leader that I can add to the list of things I can control is a good thing. And
100%.
being intentional with people that report to me and people that work for me is something that you have complete control over, and therefore you can do it well, right?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because, we're building teams, we're building businesses, we're building cultures. And I think we live in a world today where it's just like mentorship, the word mentorship isn't talked about enough.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that, as a small business owner and hiring people and building teams, this idea of being intentional and building relationship, like we've got to get back to that. And yes, look, we're in business to make money. However, that is a byproduct of all the things that you're doing before that. And one of
Yep.
them is taking care of your employees. And that is
Yep.
a culture building, element that can make all the difference in the world.
Did you tell me you're reading Unreasonable Hospitality, or have you read it yet?
I'm just starting. I'm just
Okay.
starting.
I'm like,
Yep.
I know we talked about it. So I
Yep.
got to hear Will Guidara speak at a conference I was at a couple of weeks ago. And something he said, intentionality reminded me of this. He talked about the word present. And the word present is something I've used over the last year. And goodness, let me take that back. 2.5 years is how old my daughter is. I've said I want to be a present dad. And I thought this is interesting. He gave a definition for the word present that I thought was phenomenal. He said that being present is, I'm going to butcher the way he said it. He said it beautifully. But he's basically like, nothing else in the world matters except for the person in front of you. Like that's what truly being present is. And I was like, wow, like do I, when I'm saying I'm present, am I acting as if nothing else matters except for that person? And I've thought about that with my family, obviously, but even at work, like this morning I had breakfast with a guy who we're just learning from each other. And I'm like, I'm going to be present. Like for the next hour, it's on my calendar. Nothing else is going on. I'm right here. Like nothing else in the world matters except for the guy in front of me. I thought that was just really good as far as when I think about intentionality, I think about being present and with your employees, making sure that when you're with them, being intentional means nothing else in the world matters except for what's right here,
Yeah.
right?
Because think about it, you're new, you just graduated from college, or maybe you're even in college
Yep.
and you get this first job. Maybe you're in high school and you get this first job. Kids just want to be heard, right?
Yep.
They want to feel like they're being heard, right? And that the people that they work with care. And no matter what they may say or not say, that is like the essence of starting to build like a true strong authentic culture in a way that gets the results that you're really looking for in a business, I
That's
believe.
right.
So
I, I believe so too. Brad,
yeah.
you work with sales. You do a lot of coaching when it comes to sales. We've joked that I don't have the sales gene. I don't get it. Thinking about going door to door to sell Sprint long term, like long distance plans, makes me sick to my stomach. That sounds like the worst job ever to me.
It
Um,
was.
it sounds so bad. I want to bring this full circle. You're a sales expert. You were the
Yep.
best salesman in the country for a company. You own your own business now, coaching sales. We've talked about customer experience. I want to connect it all. Can you share with me, does customer experience have an effect on sales? Because I would consider myself a customer experience expert. and someone who's awful at sales. Is there a relationship between the two? And if a business leader is listening that is a customer experience expert like me, and maybe they don't have the sales thing going on, is there a connection there, or is that a stretch?
100%. There's a total connection there, because you think about sales. Most people think about sales as just this one-on-one conversation, and that you're just trying to close.
Dude, it's the car dealership. That I can't get that out of my head. It's the car dealership, man.
Yeah. You're just trying to close the deal, whatnot. But we live in a world today. I just actually had a client call earlier today, having this exact conversation, and what I was sharing with them is that, we live in such a world today that everything is transactional. Everybody just wants to get theirs, and that is it. And I stand on the principle that sales really does come down to relationships and trust. Because if you don't have a relationship and trust with that customer or that potential buyer, why would they even want to buy from you? Right? So this whole idea of like moving from a transactional mindset to relationship mindset in sales is one thing that I believe is absolutely key. It's one thing that I absolutely learned from growing up in the family business. We were all about building relationships with our customers. In B2B sales environments that I've same principles that I actually carried with as well. And so, yeah, there's absolutely a correlation between customer experience and sales for sure, because that is the experience. And, one thing that I did hear at one point, Jacob, is that most buyers, they have a certain baseline expectation of what they're going to get from a salesperson. And that's where that's where the litmus test is.
Yep.
If you exceed above and beyond what that expectation is when they're not looking or not expecting it, that is what breaks the ice. And that's what gets them to build, trust and break down their walls, and, real conversations can start to happen there. And that's where really the magic happens. So yeah, I think sales is there's just a misnomer about sales. I think if people can think about sales as you're truly helping this other person solve a problem for them, and you're doing it in a way where you're really truly serving them, you're going to win.
I love that. Will Gadara shared a story. He consulted with a company, a car dealership actually. And It's fun. When I think about sales, all I think about is the car salespeople that just, to talk offline, I had a bad experience recently with a car dealership with a bad salesperson. But he was consulting with them. They mapped out kind of what we started talking about with the customer journey, right? Where your dad had the 10 commandments of the customer experience, and they wrote out like everything, every touch point they had with their customers. And he was like, "Is that all of them?" And they're like, "Yes." And he's like, "Well, no one mentioned like the glove box." And so what they started doing is after you buy the car, right? Yeah. So like nothing more to gain. If you're the dealership, like they've already bought the car, transaction's over with. He's like, how many people like go to open the glove box at some point? It's where you put the manual, stuff like that. It's one of those just whatever things that everyone has to do. Well, they started putting a handwritten thank you note and a Starbucks gift card in the glove box as just a like, hey, we appreciate your business.
Yes.
Like as you're out driving your new car, first coffee on us. To just like, it's an Easter egg for them to find in the glove box. Eventually they're going to open it to put napkins in or whatever. And they're going to find that Starbucks gift card and a handwritten note. And how many leads do you think they got from those people who are recommending their friends to say, oh my gosh, you got to go to this dealership? Again, it cost them what? Probably, maybe it was a $25 Starbucks gift card, but how much is that compared to how much they're going to make off of these, $30,000 vehicles? It means a lot.
Yeah, it's a memorable experience. Like how many people actually take the time to do a handwritten thank you note?
Yeah.
Let alone give something away as kind of a thank you. And that was one of the other things that I kind of learned, growing up in this business as well. One of the key tenets is any sale that's over $500 gets a phone call and a handwritten thank you note.
Nice.
And that was kind of a really cool kind of part to building that trust, but it's going above and beyond what the customer experience.
I love it. Brad, if there's a small business owner listening and they want to learn more about sales or connect with you, how can they do that?
Yeah. What I would recommend for any of you out there that are small business owners that just wants to get a better idea of how to enhance the customer experience or even sales for that matter, It's a free tool called simplifiedsalessassment.com. And you can jump on there and take the assessment, and it'll give you scores on all the key elements around this customer experience and sales. And it's a great takeaway. So you'll learn a lot about where you can improve and where you're doing great. So that's where I would go.
I love it. I'll have that linked in the episode description below, as well as if you want to connect with Brad on LinkedIn, be sure to click that there as well. Brad, thank you so much for being on and adding value today.
Awesome, man. Thanks, Jacob.